Palestine and Gaza, written October 8th, 2023. I believe that the reason why the Arab Muslims in Gaza insist on calling themselves Palestinians is because they want to claim that the entire area that was designated as Palestine by the British mandate after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire was vanquished, belongs to the Arabs, and that Israel should not have a separate country on the land. However, Israel was the reason that the area was marked out and named Palestine to begin with. Therefore, if the Arab Muslims claim the name Palestinian, which is a British designation, then they must submit to the British giving the land to the Jews. From what I've learned about hardline Muslims and their leaders, they refuse to submit to the original plan to give Jews a homeland and want the nation of Israel to cease to exist. They refuse to live in harmony with them, living alongside them in the designated separate territories, and spend their time plotting and planning to destroy Israel instead of developing where they live. Anyone choosing to live in Gaza supports these goals. They are not innocent. Otherwise, they would go to live in countries that were not ruled by extremists, such as Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, whatever the extreme leftists in the West say. Why would a moderate Muslim subject themselves to extremist Muslim rule when they have options to live elsewhere in the Muslim countries all around them, particularly Jordan? We can discern that they are not opposed to Hamas from the way they react, or the Palestinians, to the bad actions of the Hamas fighters. As if a button was pressed, Arab Muslims all over the world were out on the streets in Western countries chanting against Israel today, only one day after the Hamas attack and before there were any reactions from the Israeli military, the IDF. Like the neuroticism I've described regarding Arab Muslims refusing to accept that Palestine was created for the Jews, these people knew that their cause would be undermined because of the brutal attack. It is obvious to me that they had planned to be proactive, to deflect blame and avoid being taken to task. All it shows is that these activists were aware that the behavior was inexcusable, and they wished to drown out condemnation by loud shouting, flag waving, and taking to the streets wherever there was a significant number of their kind in residence. Some of the things that were shrieked were truly reprehensible, such as yelling "Gas to Jews" in Sydney, Australia. Yet the government there and in other Western countries failed to act decisively to show their disapproval. The Arab Muslims also grossly lie about what the IDF is doing in Gaza to eradicate the military operations there, and accuse Israel of killing women and children in astonishing numbers that statisticians report are impossible. I write this later. The UN reported that 70% of the people killed in Gaza are women and children. I believe they wanted to have the West believe that although Hamas killed women and children on October 7, Israel is deliberately retaliating and doing the same to a greater extent to minimize their culpability by comparison. To the contrary, they fail in their efforts to gaslight the world into their fantasy because the UN had to half the number of women and children killed that the Palestinian Authority reported, because it only makes everything they report suspect if it is impossible for their claims to be correct just by looking at them. And there hasn't actually been any kind of investigation that has gone to ground to find out what actually happened, and the report is said to have just come from journalists or newspaper articles. So, I carry on. For example, The Palestinian Authority cannot produce evidence of women being raped, or they haven't, or tortured, and babies being decapitated, or of families being burned, which is readily available as proof of Hamas barbarity that these militants took themselves. So the Hamas supporter shouts louder, cries, and continues to swarm in the streets in an effort to overwhelm anyone they can into not looking at the facts. They want everyone to blame Israel and thereby curtail their punishment, and to generally cause such a ruckus that the origins of the problem is obscured. This is a clumsy tactic and will not persuade reasonable, well-educated people, and will not be lost to history, whatever they do. There are warnings from certain sectors about starting World War III if Israel continues in their battle against Hamas, and all kinds of other tactics to avoid retribution from Israel for Hamas's heinous acts. Another tactic used by people when they are confronted with accounting for their wrongdoing is to behave as if they are offended at being accused. They may give the accuser the silent treatment or gossip to others about the one who is justifiably condemnatory, using information that they are privy to that they spin negatively. These are all deflection tactics and a refusal to take ownership for wrong behavior. Instead, the wrongdoer attempts to focus attention on the response of the victim, positing it as excessive ill treatment that they do not deserve. The apologists who also lie as much as they can to themselves and withhold whatever they know the victims want. In this case, Hamas withholds these hostages because they know that Israel is desperate to save them from brutal treatment or death. Even if the hostage dies, Hamas does not release the body, nor do they inform the IDF where the body is. It is well documented that murderers withhold the location of the bodies of their victims just to inflict more suffering on their relatives and friends, although it serves them no advantage when they are going to die for their crimes anyway. This is the same vicious mentality at play here. In every country, murderers are punished, except if the murder is carried out by the state. In the case of the murder of Jews by Hamas, Hamas is the state. It is clear that Gaza has no right to call themselves, or Gazans have no right to call themselves Palestinians because they are not Jewish. When the nation of Israel was established in 1948, Palestine, as a name for the territory where Israel is located, ceased to be necessary and therefore really had no use. The nations of the world need to recognize this. The United Nations Organization, which was the body that assigned Israel the land they hold, has been the most egregious in this affair. Instead of condemning Hamas for resorting to violence because of their conflict with Israel, and not looking to the UN to work out a diplomatic solution, and condemning Hamas for this, the UN instead supports Hamas, doubtless because most of the members of the UN are now Muslim-controlled states, endorsing violence as a means to achieve religious ends. The UN has been shown to operate according to occult theosophy. Therefore, all their actions are based on opposing everything that is normal and good. There is no longer a Palestine, but 3 countries, as part of the UN, endorsed a UN resolution to accept Gaza and the West Bank. These countries are Spain, Norway, and Ireland. Nothing located on the West Bank or in Gaza has been accepted by the Arab Muslims as being enough for them to call their territory or their state. And yet, these countries and the UN are pushing this agenda without being asked. Being accommodating has not worked, and they have only exposed their citizens to danger by allowing those who have openly expressed their desire to destroy the country and kill all Jews because they are Islamist fundamentalists who still hold to medieval barbaric views expressed by Muhammad. The Islamists in what is now claimed to be Palestine have sworn to continue their animosity towards Israel, and Israel has to separate from these enemies by ridding themselves completely of anyone living in their territory who wishes them harm. Gaza and the West Bank must cease to exist as a country separate from Israel, but within the territory that Israel was assigned. Thanks for listening.